Welcome, everyone. Today, we are going to explore the absolute foundation of your future teaching career in Texas, Domain I of the T-TESS evaluation system. When you picture teaching, you probably picture yourself standing in front of a classroom of students. But the truth is, the success of that moment is determined long before the bell rings. That is what Domain I is all about: planning. It is the architecture of your instruction. Today, we're going to walk through how to design intentional, student-centered lessons that not only check the boxes for your evaluation, but actually create amazing experiences for your future students. It is all part of a growth cycle. When you get your first teaching job, your principal will evaluate you using this three-step cycle. I want to emphasize right away, T-TESS is not a gotcha system. It is designed to be a continuous conversation about your growth. The cycle starts with step 1, the pre-observation, where you sit down with your appraiser before you even teach the lesson. Then comes step 2, the classroom observation, where they watch you teach. Finally, step 3 is the post-observation, where you reflect together on how it went. Domain I, planning, is the absolute star of that first step. Let's zoom in on what happens during that pre-observation meeting. The Pro-Observation Conference is your time to shine as a lesson architect. You will sit down with your appraiser and explain the why and how of your lesson. You'll talk about your objectives, exactly what the students will do. You'll discuss scaffolding connections, which just means how today's lesson connects to what they learned yesterday and what they will learn tomorrow. You'll plan your assessments, how you will actually know if they learned it. Finally, you will establish look-fors. These are specific things you want your appraiser to watch for, like, please watch how I use this new group work strategy. It's a highly collaborative process. During this conversation, your appraiser is listening to see where your planning skills fall on the T-TESS rubric. Let's look at how that rubric is structured. So, how are you actually scored? The T-TESS rubric operates on a sliding scale. On the far right, we have improvement needed and developing. Moving to the left, we hit proficient, accomplished, and finally, distinguished. It's important to know that T-TESS prioritizes continuous growth over static perfection. You aren't expected to be distinguished on your first day or even your first year. The goal is to always be moving your practice further to the left on this continuum. As future teachers, you are probably wondering what your baseline goal should be. Let's clear up a major misconception. Many of us in education are high achievers. We look at a rubric, see 5 levels, and assume that proficient, right there in the middle, is basically a C grade. Please hear me when I say this. Under T-TESS, proficient is a fantastic score. Proficient is the target. It represents a high standard of professional teaching. It means your lessons are aligned to your goals, you are checking for understanding, and most importantly, you are reaching all of your students consistently. If you are scoring proficient as a new teacher, you are doing a rock-solid job. But as you grow in your career, you will want to reach for accomplished and distinguished. How do you do that? It requires a major shift in how you view your classroom. To move into the highest levels of the rubric, you have to embrace a core paradigm shift. You have to ask yourself, when I plan a lesson, who is doing the heavy lifting? Who owns the learning? Look at the seesaw. Teacher-centered actions, where you are lecturing, managing, and doing all the talking while students just sit and listen, keep you on the right side of the rubric. To reach accomplished and distinguished, your planning must be student-centered. You have to design lessons where the students take ownership, generate their own questions, and set their own goals. Keeping that student ownership goal in mind, let's break down the 4 specific dimensions of Domain I. Domain I is broken down into 4 distinct areas, or dimensions. Dimension 1.1 is standards and alignment. Are you planning clear, well-organized lessons that match the state standards? Dimension 1.2 is data and assessment. How are you measuring student progress? Dimension 1.3 is knowledge of students. Are you designing lessons that actually connect to who your students are as individuals? Dimension 1.4 is activities. Are your planned activities engaging and pushing kids to think critically? Let's look at each of these closely, starting with how we align to our standards. In Dimension 1.1, your Proficient foundation is planning a lesson that clearly aligns with your state standards, like the TESS here in Texas, and has a logical sequence and gives students enough time to complete the work. But to make the distinguished leap, your planning has to shift to rigor and relevance. You aren't just teaching a standard, you are integrating real-world applications. You are cross-pollinating by bringing in concepts from other subjects, and you are planning for technology to actually enhance the learning, rather than just using it as a digital worksheet. Once your lesson is perfectly aligned, you have to plan how you will know if the students actually learned it. That brings us to assessment. Here we are at Dimension 1.2, Data and Assessment. A proficient teacher plans out both formal tests and informal checks for understanding, and they plan to give students consistent feedback. To jump to distinguished, we return to the idea of student ownership. Instead of you holding all the grades and data, you share the rubrics and the data with the students so they can learn to self-assess. You also plan ways to expand your communication, providing timely feedback not just to the student, but to their families as well. But remember, we aren't just teaching data, we are teaching human beings. That leads to Dimension 1.3. Dimension 1.3 is knowledge of students. Your Proficient baseline is planning lessons that connect to your students' prior knowledge and tweaking your lesson plan to help students who might have gaps in their understanding. The distinguished leap here is called peer elevation. In your planning, you intentionally design moments where students can apply their own unique strengths and cultural backgrounds to help teach their peers. You are designing a community of learners, not just a room full of isolated individuals. And how do they interact in that community? Through the activities you plan in Dimension 1.4. The final planning dimension is 1.4, activities. A proficient teacher plans questions that push all students to think deeply, and they put students in instructional groups based on what they need that day, making sure everyone knows their role. To be distinguished, you shift to inquiry and ownership. You plan activities where the students are the ones generating the complex questions. You plan group work where the students hold each other mutually accountable, rather than relying on you to police their behavior. So, we've seen the dimensions. Now, let's look at the specific words the rubric uses to score you. When you look at the T-TESS rubric, there are hidden keywords that appraisers use to grade you. Look at this chart. If an action rarely happens or only includes a few students, that is improvement needed. If it happens sometimes for most students, that is developing. The key to hitting proficient is consistency and reach. It must happen consistently, and it must reach all students. That word all is the magic word in T-TESS. To reach accomplished and distinguished, the language shifts to always and student-driven. Let's put this all into practice. Here is an example of what this sounds like when a teacher is explaining their plan to an appraiser. What does a great pre-observation conversation actually sound like? It sounds like you confidently explaining your blueprint. Look at the speech bubbles on this slide. If you say, students will use close reading strategies, we're using a Kagan structure, round robin, to show prior knowledge. Now, if you haven't taken an instructional strategies class yet, do not worry. A Kagan structure, or round robin, is simply an educational term for a highly structured group activity where every single student gets a turn to speak. By pointing out a specific, engaging group activity like that, your appraiser is taking notes. You just hit Dimension 1.3, knowledge of students, and 1.4, activities. If you say, my assessment will be a formative constructed response using sentence frames, you just proved you are proficient in Dimension 1.2, assessment, because you planned how to measure their learning. If you ask, I want you to ask the students to explain the purpose of the lesson, you are establishing a clear look for your appraiser. This conversation is a huge piece of the puzzle, but it isn't the only one. Let's look at the other ways your future principal will gather evidence of your excellent planning. Domain 1 is unique because it isn't just graded on what you do in front of the classroom. Appraisers gather evidence from 4 different areas: conferences and conversations. They will consider conversations you have before and after the lesson. Classroom observations, seeing how your plan actually plays out in real time during formal and informal observations, like walkthroughs. Artifacts, they will look at the actual documents, your physical lesson plans, the rubrics you created, your seating charts, and samples of the work your students produced. Student data, looking at how your students actually grew as a result of your planning. As we wrap up today, I want to leave you with one final guiding thought for your future careers. Great instruction doesn't happen by accident. It is designed. When you see a veteran teacher leading an incredible, flawless lesson where students are laughing, engaging, and learning deeply, it can look like magic. But it isn't magic. It is architecture. Planning, Domain I, is the supportive framework that makes dynamic, student-centered learning possible. As you step into your future classrooms, remember that you are the architect. You have to build the blueprint before your students can soar. Thank you for your time, and I wish you all the best as you begin designing your future classrooms.